We made this.
Engage!
Tea Earl Grey, hot.
There are times, sir, when men of good conscience cannot blindly follow orders. What we leave behind is not as important as how we've lived.
I'm Captain Jean Luc-Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. Make it so.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Make It So, a dedicated Star Trek Picard podcast covering the upcoming series on CBS All Access and Amazon Prime in the UK for the We Made This podcast network. I'm your host, Tony Black, and once again I'm joined by my co-host, Kurt North. How you doing, Kurt? We've been away for quite a while on STP, so how's things been?
It's been great. I've been enjoying the podcasting life as you know, with the time is now, and obviously yourself with the Xcast. I think we've it's nice to come back to my other love, Star Trek. So it's and especially the fact now we've got some more concrete details in this comic that we're going to talk about. Yeah, I should have just said MIS really instead of STP because we're Make It So. But I've just got Picard on the brain really. And you talk about got some more concrete details. We've obviously had a second trailer since we recorded, talking about the first initial trailer in July, and we didn't do an episode on that because I was stupidly busy as always. But what did you think of that more detailed trailer? Some of the dream logic, I think, was the beginning of the trailer, wasn't it? It's been a while since I watched it, but I thought it was interesting. I think the more of the Picard and the data scenes were very interesting, with some of the abstractness that came out of there, and there was kind of like a really kind of apocalyptical fight ship scenes as well, wasn't there? It was really interesting to get that second trailer, but unfortunately I'm having trouble remembering much of it, even though I've probably watched it like 500 times when it first came out. I think the key beats really I think revealed from that was that we saw an aspect of Data, even though since then they've pretty much confirmed that was sort of like an early sort of version of that scene, and it won't be quite as it looks in the trailer. We've also confirmed and seen William Riker and Deanna Troi. I must admit, I'll openly admit to this, that I was actually out on a night out that evening, and I stupidly, with several drinks on board, watched the trailer when I got home. And when I saw Riker and Picard together, I was almost in tears. Because I was a bit emotional. That was lovely. I know. I as well. I don't know if I've talked to you about this, but the moment we first see Riker, what he is washing up in the kitchen, but it kind of looks like he's doing something else. The way the camera is positioned. Never thought of that. Okay, I'm definitely watching it when I leave here. Especially given, I think their presumed child shouts, "Dad," and he goes, "In a minute!" Like he's in the middle of something. Get no, don't come in. So I think anyone can infer kind of what I'm getting at there. But the way that was shot was hilarious. Did make me laugh. But there was some fantastic things in it. You know, we know there's more Borg going to be in there. Did we see 7 of 9 in the first? We did see 7. Yeah, this is the thing, I think, because both trailers now mixed in with each other. I'm struggling to remember where they were. So, yes, 7 and 9 was in the first reveal. She was, yeah. Yes, because that was the big. Obviously, we knew that Hugh was around, but 7 was the big reveal in that episode. Yes, and I think that obviously Riker, the second one was kind of like paying homage to obviously Next Generation. Yeah, but we get some badass 7 in the second one, don't we? Holding the two Tomb Raider style guns, really. Yeah. There's a lot of action in there. There's obviously some more with the new cast members and things like that, and. Yeah, it's really exciting. You know, it's really exciting stuff in that second one. It just built on the first one, really. And yeah, I mean, what I was going to say, which I think is the second trailer as well, wasn't the kind of? It looks like whether or not it's Romulan drones or Romulan androids or versions of Data as well. I think that was that was played around with as well. So I think that would be quite interesting to see how they kind of develop that storyline, whether that's going to be a reason why Data's involved as well. I think that was the second trailer from what I remember.
Yeah, I think it was. There's loads of interesting stuff in there, and it's entirely possible we might get a third and final trailer before the show debuts. Which we're recording this on November 30th. The show debuts on January the 24th. In the UK at least. I think it's the same day in the US.
Yeah, I think they said that it's 24th of January in the US and it's within 24 hours for the UK, I think.
Okay,
I think that's what they're saying.
I think that means we might get it on Saturdays, possibly something like Fridays or Saturdays, which is cool. Yeah. And we will endeavour to get our analysis of the episode out as quick as possible. And obviously we're the first. We made this podcast to do a recap show immediately after the show airs. We've got other TV based shows that have, and the X-Cast has dabbled a little bit in that when the X-Files came back, but we've not devoted a show entirely to this. So Make It So is a bit of a first in that sense, and I think it will be exciting to dip in very quickly, as quick as we can, and talk about this show as it airs. I think it will be really interesting putting the pieces together of what's going on, because obviously they're not going to give you everything in episode 1. So
I think that you're right, because there'll be plenty of theories that are proven wrong. There'll be plenty of reactions which will change over the time, over the episodes that have aired. And when we look back at it as kind of a season overview, I think it'll be really interesting to see where we thought it was going and where it ended up being. Really, I think it would be really interesting.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. But we've decided to hop on today and record in advance, because before we get to the show, we're getting a little bit of ancillary prequel material that leads into Star Trek Picard. There is a novel coming from Una McCormack in January, which I attended Destination Star Trek in Birmingham this year, and as well as Patrick Stewart there, which was drew a massive crowd, and talking about Picard and how dropping a few teasers and hints and things like that. It also had Una McCormack confirm that we're getting a tie-in novel which focuses on an aspect of Picard's life before the show. So that's coming soon, and we will potentially, hopefully, look at that and do a little bit of an episode on that. But we're also covering our topic today, which is the first issue of the Star Trek Picard Countdown comic by the sort of supreme leader of the Star Trek comics world, Mike Johnson, who writes so many of them and has done so for over 10 years, alongside Kirsten Beyer, who is one of the writers for Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Discovery, and one of the key people involved in this new Trek universe. And this prequel is particularly focusing on maybe the area of Picard's life that is the most intriguing to fans, actually, I think, after Nemesis. And he's sort of answering questions that the trailers have sort of set up in a really interesting way. So we're going to sort of pick through this first issue, and there's 3 issues altogether, and we're going to potentially do one on each issue as they come out. But overall, before we talk in more in depth, what did you think of this first fairly brief issue, Kurt?
Well, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I'm not a massive extracurricular person with regards to extra novels and books and things with regards to canon of stories. I think I read Death in Winter, which was post Nemesis. I did read that, which I thought was really interesting, but it's not something that I would naturally get involved in. And I didn't with Countdown 2009 either. But I think because Picard and Star Trek Next Generation was such a big part of my life, and this is all tying in with the show, that it felt more natural for me to dive in. I think that'll be the same for the novels that you just mentioned there. There's some of the tie-in novel that's going to be in there, and I think that I will be actively reading and looking into them, because they feel like it's part of what we're going to be seeing, which is perfect for what I would necessarily think about, rather than being extra books around certain areas or trying to fill in gaps or whatever. This feels like really fresh and natural. I think that we discussed a lot over the first episode that we did, that there was elements to the storyline which we thought were going to be involved in some of this, and it pretty much says that we are with regards to the Romulus and the supernova. And I do think that my general thought on this was really pleasing to see, and that I appreciated the next generation Picard. What's the best way of putting it? The kind of the storyline itself opens itself to a natural progression of Picard. It's nothing anything majorly different. It's got some elements of Picard's character and the way that he would naturally react to issues, and it has some things that we've seen in plenty of Next Generation episodes, and particularly one film in particular that we've seen, in the post Next Generation TV show going into the films. I think that overall it really opens up that, and it has a lot of elements which I think it makes me feel like this is good. If the TV show is going to go this way, then it's definitely looking positive.
I agree. I think the interesting thing about tie-in comics is that they often are vehicles to sort of explore areas of the story that the TV show either wouldn't be able to do, or stylistically, tonally, it aren't quite going for. And I get the feeling that Countdown is sort of going to be in between two stools. I think it's maybe a little bit more Next Generation than the show will be, in the respect you're talking about, and we will get to that as we talk through it, because I know what you mean. But I think also it does have one foot in the areas that Picard is going to be tapping into as well. So I think it's sort of got a foot in the past and the present, or the future to us, which is nice, because it does tell a new story while being familiar at the same time, and I got that impression from it completely. I
think you've only got to look. I mean, we'll get into the first page, but we've only got to look at the first page with where it's going, and then you look obviously when you get to the story about where it's been, because the first page I think is particularly telling. But we'll get into that eventually.
Well, let's do it. Let's talk through it then. Yeah. So we're going to assume, guys, that you've potentially read Picard Countdown, which is now available from IDW Publishing. And so, spoiler warning at the beginning, because we're going to pick through it and come up with some ideas and theories. And it begins on Earth in Chateau Picard, which obviously we've seen in the trailers that at least the beginning of Star Trek Picard is going to take place in. But this is some years before that, however, 2386. And it's only a year after the main events of Countdown. And it introduces two characters who I'm wondering will appear in the show, Laris and Zaban, who are two Romulans who happen to be on Earth. And this is, I think it's around 6 or 7, maybe 8 years after Star Trek Nemesis. I can never quite remember the year that Nemesis takes place in. I think it's the very end of the 2370s. Which seems about right to me.
2379 is when Star Trek Nemesis was based.
There we go. So I'm not far off. And they are talking about how they're here because they owe one man everything, and obviously we know that's Picard from the heavy inference. And so it means that Picard. And it was revealed in the trailer, I think maybe the second trailer, and I think Patrick Stewart confirmed it in the Star Trek Destination Star Trek event, that there were two Romulans living with him. So these are presumably who we're going to see in the show, and they owe Picard a debt. And obviously the big question is, what is that debt?
Yeah, I think that I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure that we've seen a couple of characters in the true trailers that might well be. I think. Yeah. Not Laris, the other one, Zaban, yeah. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure that we've seen Romulans within that trailer, so it's quite possible.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely these guys. Presumably, they will factor into Countdown at some point, and we'll see that backstory.
It's really interesting for me that the actual comment that was said was I think it was a mistake to come here. And that they were feeling like they were outsiders, and I thought that's really interesting, considering that the world that we're living in now, that the fact you've got so many immigrants coming in, and the immigrant crisis, the way people are dying trying to cross, oceans and stuff. I think that may well play into it, which I took from that first page.
Well, I mean, it definitely seems to make sense, given that when we get to Utopia Planitia, we meet Geordi, who is now in charge, it seems, of building the fleet, who are going to Romulus or Romulan space in order to help evacuate the Romulan Star Empire, basically, because they are facing the biggest humanitarian crisis probably the Alpha Quadrant has ever seen in Star Trek history, realistically, thanks to the supernova that is, imminent. So it does make sense that if the Romulans are going to end up like refugees in a similar way that in the alternate, Abrams universe, the Vulcans ultimately end up being after what happens in the first Star Trek film.
In the Star Trek 09, and it's not overtly said within the comic, but it was 2386 that the vineyard scene is on that first page. In 2009, it was 2387 that the star exploded, and it says within a year.
Okay.
So I don't know, and it doesn't explicitly say, that in 2086 it's already exploded, but they could have easily have left before then. So I just think and whether or not there's a reason why they've left that year gap in between, because obviously Picard says at one point, it could be a year with a ticking time bomb, we don't know. So I think that's an interesting concept as well. It's
interesting, though, that you're saying that, because one of the things, I did a review of this comic for Pop Culture and Comics, a website, and one of the things that I talked about was how it's going to sync up with the Star Trek 09 continuity, and if it's going to quite sync up with the same. Everyone has assumed that the Hobart supernova is a point of canon, a complete point of canon that is fixed now, and that the Abrams universe sort of branches off from that. But the Star Trek Countdown comic, the official prequel to Star Trek 09, which was written by Mike Johnson, or co-written by Mike Johnson, almost seems to be contradicted a little bit by some of this. Because in that, by the point of the supernova going off, Picard is an ambassador to Vulcan, and he's dying. But he's dying of like the disorder that he was troubled with, Iromonic syndrome, which we see in All Good Things. And it doesn't look like that's happened in this continuity. So there is a little bit of rewriting going on in order to make him an admiral and make him. And the canonical, it's one of those things where their answer would probably be, well, Countdown 2009 wasn't canon. This is canon, and this is the difference. They are now a little bit taking this stuff a little bit more seriously, in that a lot of these tie-ins, a lot of the tie-ins for Discovery that have happened, a lot of the prequels, a lot of the stuff that's happened in the Mirror Universe, I think they're considering that canon. A lot of the books that are being written around Discovery, and potentially will get for Picard, because you can bet your bottom dollar that we will have a bunch, over the next couple of years, we'll have a bunch of tie-in novels that explore the main characters in Picard, particularly the new characters and their backstories. Yeah. That will absolutely happen. I'm sure it's already in the pipeline. Books are probably already being written. So they do a lot more of that now, and actually working as a team. The writers of the books, the comics, the writers of the episodes, to sort of sync it all up. But back then it didn't quite work in the same way. And Countdown, I think in that there was Data was sort of revived, and he was captain of the Enterprise. I'm sure he was. So, there's lots of things that aren't quite linking up here. Right. But no, it's an interesting point, because we don't know precisely a lot of the details yet. But it certainly seems that Picard is in the middle of it, because he's not on the Enterprise, is he? He's on the USS Verity. Did that come as a surprise to you? Because it did a little bit to me.
It did. I expected him to be in more of a, like in Deep Space Nine, with the admirals on the space stations and things, where Sisko would go to them, and then eventually Sisko was based out of the space station. I expected something more like that. Yeah. So he'd be like overseeing the plans. But this to me looks like he's being given a ship to, almost like be the emissary of or ambassador for both sides. I think it mentions about skipping between the neutral zone and back again. That he's actually on the ground level, and he's actually on the shop floor effectively, and dealing with these issues as they arise. But it does. I thought it would be more of that kind of strategic planning rather than being on the shop floor like he is now.
I think it does make sense, I guess, in the sense that by the end of Nemesis, he'd sort of made inroads with the Romulans, hadn't he? You know, the suggestion was that Donatra in that film might end up becoming, you know, the gaffer.
Yeah.
And whether she has, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he'd sort of made an inroad with the Romulans after Shinzon. So it kind of makes sense to me that he might be one of the few Starfleet officers that the Romulans would trust to go into their space and do this. But so I don't mind that, but I kind of don't quite understand at this point why it's not the Enterprise. Like, why the Enterprise, if it's not quite... Because the Verity, you know, the panels in there, it looks very, very new. It looks huge. Like, it's really sort of next level sort of Federation, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the Odyssey space class from Star Trek Online.
Right. Okay.
That's the actual design of it, and it's I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's like 1.5 times or 2 times bigger than the E. So
right, okay.
yeah, and a lot of people have kind of jumped on that, saying, "Oh, they've included the Odyssey class starships, and they're really looking forward to seeing it." Well, obviously seeing it on here, but there was a lot of reaction to it that they're actually using that from Star Trek Online.
Well, I think there's quite a lot of hope that we might see some of this stuff as flashbacks, and we might see a bit of a Starfleet armada. I'm not, given they're doing this in the comics, I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen now, but.
No.
You never know. And I think the problem they might have in the show is to try and explain why he's not on the Enterprise. Because the immediate question will be, oh, he's Picard. Why is he not on the Enterprise? That doesn't make any sense. What's the Verity? What's this shit? Because that's the thing. Not everyone is going to read this. You know, the people who listen to this podcast will, because they are interested enough in the show and Star Trek to listen to a podcast about it. But, you know, the majority of people are going to watch Picard just normally.
I mean, you could maybe look at what Star Trek Discovery did with, you know, they brought in the Enterprise, and that was they did it fairly successfully from what I've heard, but, you know, redesigning the original Enterprise and having the bridge that they designed is quite a risky move, and I can imagine that being the same for, like, if there's the Enterprise E, or even if it was the Enterprise F, they could get away with the Enterprise F potentially, but from all accounts, it looks like the Enterprise E is still the one that's ongoing, and someone else owns that, or someone else is captaining that. So whether or not, I think they might be just avoiding the fact that, you know, not having to, like, go back to like some Nemesis and wherever, maybe a redesign potentially. That may be a reason why.
It could be, and it could be that we might well see the Enterprise in this 3-part, because, you know, you mentioned that there's somebody else. There is a hint that he says the Enterprise is in good hands. And, you know, there's a suggestion between them that they both know the person who's running the shop well.
It's probably going to be Worf, isn't it?
Well, it might be. Because it's not Will and Deanna, because they're still on the Titan, which they went off to at the end of Nemesis, and then there's been many tie-in novels about that. Data is dead, and B4 doesn't look like B4 is Data and a captain of the ship, necessarily, according to the trailers anyway. So, although it might be. So who's left? Geordie's doing this. It's probably not going to be Bev, let's be honest. So, who's the likely one? Although Worf did go off and be a bit of an ambassador to the Klingons, didn't he, after Deep Space Nine? So it's whether or not that's the way.
And he is that on Star Trek Online as well. So,
right.
Yeah.
So who is it? I hope it's Admiral Jellicoe myself. That'd be great. That's who I want.
Yeah, well, we mentioned that in the previous podcast.
Exactly.
So we're definitely got a Jellicoe thing going on.
I just want Jellicoe back, to be honest. It's obviously run on the Verity, and Picard goes off into Romulan space, and his job is to help resettle. He keeps talking about the unseen clock, you know, in the idea that they don't quite know when the supernova is going to kick off. They don't quite know how long they've got. They know they've got maybe about a year or so, as we've talked about, but they're not quite sure. And what I quite find interesting was he talks about how the Romulans only admitted the truth when the Federation intercepted communications that there was a crisis. That's very China, very Soviet. The idea that they would keep, you know, a massive impending, you know, like their own sort of Chernobyl, or even Praxis from the Undiscovered Country.
Yeah.
You know, they would keep it all secret, and then they would only admit it when they were caught red-handed, you know?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I really like that. I think that's a really good... That's very, very, very Romulan.
Yeah.
And that was 4 years ago, so it was 2381 when they first detected the supernova was going to happen, and they've been evacuating worlds since then. So, you know, Picard's definitely got a promotion after Nemesis, and you know, I don't know about you. I'm guessing that he was promoted to do this job.
I had that thought that it did feel like that they have kind of taken that as like, you know, you've been promoted, but you are the Admiral in charge of, you know, this whole situation.
Yeah,
I did feel that.
Yeah, it's kind of they needed someone who was, you know, I mean, at this stage he's probably the most legendary Starfleet captain that lived. You know,
yeah.
Who has done more than this guy?
There's basically him and Sisko, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, Sisko was a completely different,
yeah,
you know, thing with being the emissary and whatever. But
or Janeway.
He's Janeway, coming back, and obviously we got her in Nemesis, didn't we?
Yeah.
But what did you make of the? And was it at Destination Star Trek where the new Admiral uniform? Because the uniform's actually in existence, isn't it?
Yeah. It's really nice. It's a really nice year, which suggests that we might well get some flashbacks about with him in this uniform. Actually,
yeah.
You know, and that they've created this uniform. It was on display, as was his Chateau Picard stuff.
Yeah, because he said in that interview, didn't he, that he didn't want to be back in the uniform, but from the looks of this, it looks like he's going to be in 2, because it was very Next Generation-y when he gets the abstractness painting with Data, and then we've got the Admiral uniform, which is a real life uniform. So it will. Yeah, I think we're going to definitely see him in that uniform without a doubt.
I think we are. It'd be interesting to see if they de-age him a little bit. Oddly enough, as well, and do some of the de-aging technology to make him look a bit young. Who knows? But yeah, it's a cool uniform. It's just a bit more futuristic enough, while still being, you know, post First Contact-ish kind of uniform.
Yeah.
But yeah, at this point, obviously they're off beyond the Romulan neutral zone, and we meet Picard's first officer, who is a main character from the show, the first main character from Star Trek Picard. Here, Commander Raffi Musica, Lieutenant Commander Raffi Musica, I should say, who's the first officer of the Verity, and she comes in telling Picard that they want the ship to divert to Uyat Beta, a Romulan colony zone where there's 10,000 evacuees apparently waiting to be picked up. So, firstly, what did you think of Raffi then, and her relationship with Picard here?
My first initial reaction was the use of the banter between the two of them when she says JL, and, you know, are you never going to call me Admiral, which I thought was really an interesting take, because, you know, in all of the years that we've seen Picard, you know, it's always been, you know, Jean Luc for those who have an affection to him, or, you know, or Captain Picard. You know, it's never really been anything else. But the fact that she calls him that, I think, infers more on her character than anything else. I think that she's and I've seen Michelle Hurd in quite a few TV shows, a couple of episodes of TV shows. And I think that I can probably imagine her being that kind of, you know, playful sort of character. So I think that instantly gives you a rapport that I think we might see more of her than a lot of the crew to begin with. I think she might be in. My guess would be probably in one of the first couple of episodes when he's, I would assume, developing or gathering the team together. That's the way I would see it anyway, because she does seem that kind of playful character that obviously has a big history with him.
Yeah, she might be his window towards the rest of the characters, actually. It's entirely possible, because she might be the one he goes and looks for, because they clearly have worked together now for a while. The suggestion is that they've been maybe on the Verity for a few years doing this, and that he's built up a rapport with her in a similar way that he would have done with some of his crew on the Enterprise. So they obviously know each other well. They have a good rapport, and it bodes well for the show in that we can see a little bit of that. I suspect some, you know, hardcore next geners are going to be a little bit brittle about her, though, because, you know, who's this new character who's got a really great relationship with Picard? You know, where's Bev? Where's all these others? You know, that's what you'll find potentially.
But the thing is, I mean, you've got to look at all good things must come to an end, and his exact words were, you know, I should have done this a long time ago. You know, and that's character development. You know, we then move into the movies, and it becomes more of a family based, not show, but family based crew. You know, again, weddings with Riker and the likes. That, you know, I think that naturally his character has moved on, and he's learning to become more open to people, because he has been closed off for so long. I mean, you think about how early he was in season 1, where, I hate kids, and that kind of authoritative person, and he's a completely different person to that.
That's true. He's evolved, hasn't he? So yeah, that's a good point, really. But yeah, obviously they're sent off to this colony, which appears to be abandoned, but Picard's got the needle, really, that the Romulans won't let them scan their planets. They're being very cagey about what resources they've got. They know they need help from the Federation, but they are trying to be as covert about anything they have as possible, so that their civilization can be saved, but Starfleet won't learn everything about them, which is really interesting in that it immediately puts them in a difficult position. It's a bit like having, say, Western scientists going over post-Chernobyl to help the Soviets clean up the mess.
Yeah.
Even though the mess hasn't happened yet, this is preempting the mess, essentially. It is that whole thing that it's an awkward relationship that he has with these people. And that's why he's a bit uncertain about this planet that they're diverted to, Uyat Beta. And they are introduced to Athos, who's calls himself the major domus of the governor of Uyat Beta. So he's the sort of man in front of the man. And they beam down to this planet, which is a classic sort of Romulan colony, sort of on the edge of space. So it's right at the edge of Romulan territory. There's shades of Nemesis about it all. It feels like keeping the Romulan thing going does feel like, I think, a good continuation from that movie, doesn't it, really? Because it sort of, even though that film ended, it left a lot of open sort of questions about, what was happening with the Romulan Empire.
Well, yeah, I think that if you look back at the show, that, are you going... The Borg have been done to death in Voyager. We've got 2009, which had this... we've talked about the Hobo Star anyway, but we're already linked into that. Plus, Nemesis was the last Star Trek film. And it just feels natural that we're going to get some Borg elements in the show. So I think that potentially let's leave that resting for a little bit longer. And you're right, it does feel like, I think even at one point in this comic, just a few pages back, where they're saying, because of what you've done with the whole shins on thing, that it just feels natural as a progression, and the way that TV is now, with being more prestige and more, sort of chapter based, that you'd feel that would be a natural progression rather than just starting afresh and going, we've got this is what happened to Picard with some random people, whereas the Romulans, I think, is a good choice. And you mentioned obviously about China and likes of Korea or whatever like that, and the world that we're living in, that the Romulans are probably the best allegory for that, really. Yeah. And I think that works from that degree as well, and it's only going to get more interesting, I think, as we delve into the actual show itself.
No, I think it will, and this little world is interesting because when they're introduced to the governor, this woman called Shiana, she is very accommodating and sort of suggests that this planet is different to a lot of the other Romulan colonies, where they won't get much access and they're not going to see a lot. They're like, it's open, everything, you can see everything. We're not afraid of anything, which is strange in itself. Yeah. And she calls him the vanquisher of Shinzon, and she suggests that he's now the saviour of the Romulan people. So there's a strange sort of semi-worship about Picard as someone different to the rest of Starfleet, which you can understand.
Yeah.
But it's a strange colony, and the reason isn't quite explained in a way, is it? Why are they so open when, as we find out as we go towards the end of this first issue, they have a massive slave population working here, who are the native population of this planet. When Athos says that there's 4 to 5 million of these people, and the Romulans number about 10,000. It's a stark moment of whoa. Okay, that's insane.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Do you know what? It's strange as well, because I was. My other half is interested in watching it. She's become a Star Trek fan through me, and we obviously watched Star Trek Discovery and that together. And she's watched a lot of the Next Generation and whatever. And I was explaining the comic to her because she doesn't want to read it, but I explained kind of what was happening, and she was happy to listen to it. And she went, 5 million. I went, yeah. Well, there's only thousands of them. Well, how does that work? But obviously, I was saying, well, it's an indigenous species. We don't know what intelligence level that they're at either. But it's just effectively that the number of 5 million in itself, and the way that Picard reacts to that, and there's no way they're building like wave after wave of fleets to take thousands of Romulans off this particular planet, but they're not capable of taking 5 million, and that itself, as we get into the rest of the comic, is definitely going to be really interesting in parts 2 and 3, without a doubt.
Well, it's what you intimated about at the beginning, which is the very next generation idea of this entire comic, which is that Picard is faced with a massive moral choice. He's faced with a huge moral conundrum, one that reminded me actually of the Baku in Insurrection, because it is a similar sort of idea in that the Romulans are willing to sacrifice these people that they have, as they describe it, gifted Romulan civilization to in exchange for their labour. In reality, they've colonised a planet, they've built a lot of their structures on there, and they've put these people to work with their advanced technology and fear and that kind of thing. And in this case, Picard immediately is like, he goes full Picard. He's like, what? This is outrageous. And he goes back to Shiana and says, but we came here to evacuate 10,000 people, and now you're telling me there's 5 million. Like, we've got to help them. And basically the Romulans turn around and go, no, you're here to save us. Not them. And it's great. That is, I think, and this sounds like it could be if not the reason that Picard leaves Starfleet, it could be the moral problem that causes him to leave Starfleet, I think.
Yeah, and I think that you look back at episode Insurrection, which is what I was thinking about, that not necessarily tied up in a bow or it kind of succeeds, but whatever happens with this indigenous race, or whatever happens as part of that, is going to end up in a failure, which obviously leads to Picard leaving. And I like that idea that, it's no longer a case of, Star Trek being, the fact that they managed to succeed, that failures do happen, and that it's the ramifications of what happens afterwards. And I think that this has very much, like as you said before, it's kind of old Trek going into new Trek, that you've got what the next generation would be about, and in the likes of Insurrection, but what's it going to become? And I think that this story is definitely crossing that bridge.
Well, the question is whether, because obviously by then Shiana decides to lock him up until he decides to change his mind, because Picard takes a stand and says, no, I'm not going to help you. Well, while you're not going to help these people, I'm not going to help you. So she locks him away, and the episode ends with him and Raffi captives by the Romulans. But the question is whether or not Starfleet will help. And that's what was that. And what keeps ringing in my head at the end of this is that they're not going to help. They are going to turn around to him and say, they've got to die.
We've got a remit.
We're here to save the Romulans. This is about more than this. This is about the geopolitics of the situation. This could help us make peace with the Romulans if we do this properly. If we pull this off, it could save millions of lives in the end, etc., etc., etc. The whole greater good thing. I'm expecting an Admiral Dougherty to walk in at one point, and come out with, not him, because obviously he's dead, but a Admiral Dougherty. I'd love it to be Janeway. I'd love it if Janeway appears in this comic, and Janeway is the one going, Jean Luc, we've got to do the, and he's there. Wouldn't that be brilliant if Janeway comes in and she's the Admiral saying, it's tough, we've got to do this. But I don't think it will.
Yeah, and it's not beyond that, especially after the events in Endgame. So it's not beyond the case of her agent.
That's a way. It'd be no sweat to get her in. They could bring her in this. She's out there. Who knows? But I think, or Admiral Nechayev. Let's have her back. I think it would be interesting to see Picard in that position again. And I suppose some might suggest that it's treading old ground, but I think it's exactly what Picard is, exactly who he is. This is exactly the kind of thing that he would, if Starfleet, essentially condemned 5 million innocent people to death, it's exactly the kind of thing he'd quit over, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll see where it goes. What are your theories then for issue 2, Kurt, as we end this?
Honestly, I don't know. I think that there's going to have to be some sort of coming together or negotiation for Picard's release, I think. And that it's kind of what you were saying, really, that we're going to have to see Starfleet in some form, because I think that we've seen, and whether or not we get the Enterprise back.
Yeah.
Because it is mentioned about who's on the Enterprise, so do we find out that before the TV show even kicks in? Do we not see the Enterprise at all in the show, and we just see it in the comic? And the Enterprise is sent to negotiate his release, and then we'll take it from there. I think that could be potentially the opening of it. I definitely feel that I don't know that there's I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of all I'm thinking about. I mean, it's all open the open. I feel it's more in the open than I would have thought going into the comic, because the comic actually reaffirmed some of the things I thought would happen. I.e., like going to the Hoba Star and things around that issue. Now, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have thought about the 5 million people or whatever, but I definitely thought that the Romulan aspect of the star and its impending doom was something that was going to happen. But yeah, so I'm not entirely sure, and I kind of like the fact that I'm not sure as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very long comic, honestly. It's only 3 issues, so It seems to be that it might be geared around this specific problem, but it definitely suggests we could get other things. We could get the Enterprise. We could get 1 or 2 of the other Next Generation crew who we haven't seen, or we might not be seeing in Picard, because obviously we've got Geordi in this, and Geordi doesn't seem to be in season 1 of Picard as far as we know. He might well crop up yet, and there have been hints that there are other characters going to prop up that we don't know about yet. And if I was to put money on it, it would be Geordi cropping up at some point in Picard.
Yeah, like even if it's a video screen or something like that.
I wouldn't be surprised in the least. So but we could see more, and I think it will be interesting to see what happens there. But it's a good story. It's a good solid little story to hook us in on. Very Next Generation-y, very Picard-y, and with a few surprises in between. So, Kurt, should we come back and do issues 2 and 3? I think we should, shouldn't we?
I think we should, without a doubt.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. I don't know when they're coming out. My assumption is they're once monthly.
I think there's one at the end of December, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be one at the end of December, one at the middle of January, end of January.
Yeah, probably just before the show, yeah, more than likely.
Yeah.
So we'll come back and talk about those and unpick this comic, and potentially the novel as well when that comes out, so we'll see how we get on with that. But yeah, we'll be back towards the end of December then to talk more Picard. So thanks, Kurt. Where can people find you quickly before we come back again?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @rmoldrake. That's a play on an X-File episode, and that's @RMULDRAKE. I'm not tweeting on there as much as I want to at the moment, just with how busy I am at work and doing my other podcast with yourself, Tony, obviously co-producing The Time Is Now, and that's at
keeping
the Time
you
Is
busy.
Now pod. So yeah, keeping me going. And that's all about the TV show, the 90s TV show Millennium, starring Lance Henriksen. So that's what we're currently based on. We're getting to the end of that now. As this podcast will air, I think we're getting to Christmas time, so we're going to take a little break from that as well. Also, as well, my new season, of Pick Up a Podcast will be starting around January-February time as well. So that'll be popping up shortly. I've got quite a few, 2 or 3 guests that I've booked in already, and I'll be getting some more in for the second season. So that's what I'm up to over the next couple of months.
Lovely. Okay. Well, you can find me at AJ Blackwriter on Twitter, and make sure you check out We Made This at We Made This Pod, and on Facebook for lots of other different stuff: TV, movies, music, a real range of things on there. So look up the network, see if there's anything else that takes your fancy. So we'll be back at the end of December for another cup of Earl Grey and some Picard discussion. So we'll see you then. And until then, engage!